Hey guys, in this series of videos we're going to show you how to use CAD to build your own 3D models. Even if you've never done any 3D modeling before, you should be able to follow along with this. We're going to make a headphone winder like these guys here that you can use to sort of organize your headphones. The program we're going to use is called Onshape, which you can get just by visiting onshape.com. There's a link in the description, and that way you'll be able to create an account, log in, and just follow along with the steps that we're doing today. Okay, this is the screen that you see when you first log into Onshape after you've created an account. These are just some tutorials that you could do if you'd like to. I've done a few of them, they're not bad. I'm gonna do some sort of more basic tutorials though for those who've never used a CAD program before. At this point, before we create a file, the very first thing that you'll need to do is make sure you check, well, if you're sensible, is change your unit system to metric, because, I mean, if you use imperial, that's confusing. So you want to click on your name up the top right and choose Manage Account, and then go to Preferences, and you can change your default units here by changing length units to millimeter and mass units to gram, and hit Save Units. Mine won't let me, obviously, because I've already changed it. And then hit Onshape logo up the top left, and that will take you back to the tutorials page. We can then hit Create to make a new object or a new file. You can enter a document name. I'm going to enter Headphone Winder at this point because that's what we're going to make, and you can choose whether you'd like this to be a private or a public file. I might make a blog post about that as well and put a link in the description just to explain that to those of you who haven't used Onshape before and don't quite understand that. And you want to hit Create. This will take a few seconds to do based on your internet connection, so I'm using the 4G tethering off my phone, so that's pretty quick. Okay, so this is the screen that you see when you first log into your part studio, is what it's called, where you're going to start creating parts. This looks very similar to the main screen on many other CAD programs, which I might even show you here. Up the top you see the main toolbar. This is where the tools that you use are going to be, and that will change based on what you're doing, just like in many other programs. So if, for example, in Word, when you're typing, you get some tools up the top, and when you're working in a table, the tools look different. Same thing will happen in Onshape. Down the left-hand side, this is what's called our feature tree. So every time we do something or we do a step on our shape, something will show up here or as a list of steps that you can go back and alter at any time. In the center here, we see at the moment our three what I call base reference planes, which is a term stolen from the CAD program Solidworks. And these base reference planes can be used to either create shapes on or use as sort of a reference later on in our object, and that will make sense in a minute when we start doing it. Up the top right hand side here, this is what I call the view control box, and you can use this to navigate around your camera. This is especially useful if you're on a laptop and you don't have an actual mouse. If you're using a touchpad, you can click on these views or on the corners or on the edges, for example, and it will take you to that view so that you can sort of see what's going on. Alternatively, you can use the mouse for this, so I'm holding down right click and dragging around, and that lets you sort of pan around. You can also press down your scroll wheel to pan like this, and you want to scroll up and down to zoom in and out. So without further ado, I guess we'll start making our object. Like I said before, this CAD program and many other modern CAD programs work by drawing a 2D sketch and then using various tools to either create that to turn it into a shape or to remove that to cut it out of another shape. So I'm going to start by hitting the sketch button up the top left, and I'm going to choose our top plane. And now you can see this other big rectangle's popped up that says Sketch 1. That's just to show you where you're drawing your sketch. I'm now going to hit top on my view control box to change to the top view so that we can sort of see what's going on a bit better. And I'm going to start drawing our first sketch. There's a few tools up the top that we'll use today. The first one is going to be our rectangle tool. It has a little drop down box next to it, so I want to choose center point rectangle. The reason I want to choose center point rectangle is because I want to create a rectangle that's symmetric or symmetrical around the center point here, which is called the origin, is that little dot in the center there. So I'm going to choose center point rectangle, and then I'm going to choose this origin, and as I drag out you can see it creates a rectangle that is based around that origin point. I've just made a random sized rectangle, and I can change that by using the dimension tool, which is going to be your best mate in this program. So you can choose dimension, and I can change, for example, just by clicking on the left or right hand side of my box, dragging away. Make sure you click in the middle of nowhere. Don't accidentally hover over something else like this indicated in orange, because that will do something else. So make sure you click in the middle of nowhere, and you can change this number. For this design, I'm going to enter in 25 millimeters, and then I'm going to change the length of this box, or the sort of width, I guess I should say, of this rectangle to maybe 65 millimeters. Now, I've drawn this rectangle. To turn that into a 3D rectangle or a rectangular prism, you want to hit the extrude button up the top left, and by default it will create this 25 millimeters thick, or to the depth here it says of 25 millimeters. You can change that by either dragging this little arrow in the middle of the screen or just by changing that number. So I'm just going to make it 5, hit the green tick, and there's our 3D rectangular prism. Now at this point the base reference, I might leave, never mind. Okay, so to continue, the next thing I'm going to do is I might start cutting out some circular sort of things here just to make this shaped a bit nicer. So I'm going to do another sketch. This time, instead of choosing my top plane, I'm going to choose the top surface of my rectangle. So like I said before, you don't need your sketch plane to be a base reference plane. It can be any flat surface of an object that you've already created. So I'm going to click there, go back to top view. Now, because this is for people, I'm aiming this tutorial for people who have never used any CAD program before, I'm going to try and use the simplest tools and the simplest methods of doing things that I can think of. So in this case, I'm just going to use a circle tool. And what I want you to do is, you can see if you sort of hover towards the center there, you get that dotted line to show you that this is centered on around that origin again. And I'm just going to draw a big circle like this. And I'm going to change, using the dimension tool, its diameter, which I can do just by clicking on the edge of the circle, dragging away and clicking in the middle of nowhere. And I might make that 120 millimeters. Now you can see it changed that to be a bigger circle, but the center point is still in line with the origin. The next thing I can do with the dimension tool, so I've used it so far to say how long a line is, and now I've said what the diameter of a circle is. The other really useful thing you can do with it is set distance between two things. So in this case, I'm going to set the distance from the center point of the circle to the origin. And as I drag out here, it will ask me, or I can input a different number. So I might make this, I'm actually pretty happy with where it is there. I might just change that to 65. And it just moves a little bit. That might even be too much. So I'll put this up to 68. Okay, that looks good. Now I want to do the exact same thing on the bottom. So you could either get your circle tool out again and draw another circle and dimension it and position it. Or just to introduce you to a new tool, we can mirror this. So if you click on this mirror tool up here, and then you want to select a mirror line is what it says. So you want to choose the line that you're mirroring across. So I'm going to choose this, which is actually the top view of your front base reference plane. You click on that and you can see it's selected there now, so it knows. But that's turned yellow to say that's what we're mirroring across. Now it says select entities to be mirrored. An entity is just a part of your sketch basically. So at this point I can choose the edge of my circle and it will just flip across there. If you now deselect your mirror tool, it will apply that and it's good to go. So now if I hit extrude, it starts adding that again to its default thickness of 25, but I don't want to add it. I actually want to cut this out. So up here on this pop-up box that's come, I can choose remove and it will start cutting that out. And then all you need to do is make sure that this number in depth is either bigger than the thickness of your object. In this case, we want to cut it all the way through. If you didn't want to cut it all the way through, you just can change this to something obviously that's less than the thickness of this shape, like 3, for example, and you can see what that's doing to it. I do want to go through everything though, so instead of just changing this to a number that's bigger than the thickness of that, I'm actually going to change this blind drop-down box to through all, and that will cut through all. Give it a tick, and that's cool. So that's kind of what we're doing with our headphone winder. I'm going to have 2 holes here with slots that you can put 1 earbud each hanging in. We'll wrap it around this center part here, and then we'll shove it into another hole that's just there, and I might put 1 here for a key ring or something. So I'm going to do another sketch on the top of this shape, and to do what I just explained, I might just do a circle that's roughly up here somewhere, and a rectangle, a corner rectangle this time, which I'm going to link to the right hand side of my shape, and just drag in roughly to there. It doesn't really matter. Now that looks messy obviously, and that's not exactly where I want things. I can control all of this with my dimension tool. So the first thing I'm going to do, actually I need to measure my headphones just to make sure I get all of these holes correct. So I've got on the back of my earbud, the sort of cable relief tension part is 4 millimeters diameter, so I know how big I need to make that hole. And the wires that I need to feed into this are just under 2 millimeters, so I'll make that 2 millimeters. So I need to make the diameter of this hole 4 millimeters, and I need to make the height of this rectangle 2 millimeters. So those are the 2 dimensions that I just measured off my headphones. The next thing that I'm going to do is I want these to be centered. And the way I can do that is by setting the distance from the center point of my circle to one of the edges of my rectangles here to half of whatever the height of this was. So you can just enter 1, obviously that's half of 2, we're not silly. But if that's a really complicated number, what you can actually do here is you can input equations. So if that was like 7.432, for example, you could type in 7.432 slash or divided by 2. So in this case, I could go 2 divided by 2, and that will position that to 1. Just a pro tip there for you. Now the other thing I want to do is I want these to line up. So what I'm going to do is I want the center point of my circle, to attach to the end of this rectangle. So I can set the distance between that center point and this line to 0, and it will line them up. Now the only other thing I might want to change is the distance from the top. So I'm setting the distance from the center point of my circle to the top edge of my shape here, and I might set that to 4.5 millimeters. And I think it's a bit, it's not bad. I might just check what's that distance. Is 6. Yeah, I might reduce that to maybe 5. Actually, I think 6 was not bad, so I'll leave that at 6. Okay, so now I've got it there. Now what I want to do actually is I want this same sketch here that I've just drawn on the bottom right hand side and on the top left hand side, and also on the bottom left hand side, except when I cut it through I'm going to do something different, so I'll talk about that when I get there. It's very easy to mirror this just like we did before to get it to the bottom right, and it's very easy to mirror this one like we did before to get it here on the top left, but it's difficult to get it to the bottom left. So what I actually usually do here is I use 2 separate mirrors. I'm going to do it once, mirror it across this line, and I'm going to choose my circle and these 3 edges of my rectangle, and then I'm going to deselect my mirror tool to apply it, and now I'm going to do another mirror across this line, and I'm going to select all of them. You can see it's applied that twice. So there we go, there's my sketch ready to be extrude. I'm not going to hit the extrude button right here, I just want to show you another way that you can do this. If we hit tick, and now you can see the sketch is there on the top of your shape, it just hasn't been used for anything yet. So if we can press extrude at this point, and now what it wants you to do is it wants you to select the sketch regions that you're going to extrude. So I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to select all of these, which I don't want to add on to 25 mils, I want to remove through all. And I can just be clicking each of these regions to say I'd like to remove those regions. On this bottom one, I don't want to remove the slot, so I'm just going to not select it because I'd actually like to put a keyring in there. So I'm just going to leave that and hit tick. If you accidentally select it and you hit tick, or at this point if you decide you also don't want this one, you can actually come back into this extrude just by right clicking on it and choosing edit, and then you can just deselect one of those regions and it will go away. But I did want that, so I'm just going to choose undo. And I got my little slot back there. So that's looking pretty good. That's where I can put the 2 earbuds will hang there, and I can wrap it around here, and my little headphone jack will slide in here, keyring in that hole. A couple of things I might like to do just to make this look a bit better. So that's all the steps I want to do for function, but now I want it to look a bit nicer. So I'll show you the fillet tool, which is this one here. You can use that to click on a corner or a sharp edge, and it will round it off. The default is 5 millimeters, which I'm pretty happy with. I might not change that, I quite like it. I'm just going to hit tick, and there we go, we've got those filleted corners now that look quite nice. If I was actually to wrap my headphones around this, these sharp edges would dig into the plastic and or whatever the cable's made out of, wire, and it will start eating into it. So I'm actually going to change that as well. You could fillet it, which might be probably better actually, but I'm going to show you another tool which is called chamfer, which just does 45-degree cuts. You can tell it to not do a 45-degree cut, but I'll talk about that in another tutorial. You can see here it started to do that 45-degree cut. I might change that to a distance of just 1.5 millimeters, and then I'm also going to choose these other 3 edges so that it does that all the way around. And hit tick. Now that's looking pretty good. The only other thing that we might want to do is sort of make each of them a bit more unique. So you might choose to write your name on it. So if we do another sketch on the top of this part, and you can actually grab this text tool up here and just draw a box, even though the box will be changed size in a minute. It's just how it works. So you can type your name in here. I'm going to type in subscribe because you should all subscribe. And then I'm going to hit tick. And you can see it pops up here. Now, there's a couple of things that you can do to resize this using the dimension tool. The easiest way to do that is just to grab your dimension tool and work off this bound box that you can see. Obviously, depending on the font, some of the letters may ascend above that, so you'll have to pay attention to that. Just be careful. I'm just going to change the height of this box to maybe 8 millimeters, and that should give me a decent size. Yep, that looks great. Now, in order to get this centered, I can change the distance from this line here in the center of my word, and this, which is the top view, I believe, of my right plane, and I can change that to 0. And to get it centered this way, there's a few different ways that you could do it. I'm just going to do it by eye. So, well, actually what I can do is I've set that to 8, so I can change the distance from the bottom edge of this to my, whoops, I just missed that. From the bottom edge of this to my origin, which is there, and I can change that to half of 8. So again, if I don't know what half of 8 is, I can type in 8 divided by 2, and that changes it to 4. That looks pretty cool. I'm going to extrude this. I'm going to remove it. Now, I don't want to go all the way through, and that's because if we were to 3D print this, the centers of the B and the E will just fall out. So I'm not going to go all the way through. I'm only going to cut this to a depth of maybe 1 millimeter, and then I'm just going to hit tick, and there's your word there. Okay, so the only other thing you might like to do, obviously like I did here, put these edges to reduce pressure on your cables. You might use the fillet tool to do the same thing on these circles. That's way too big. I might just do that 1 millimeter to the top and bottom of all of these circles, and that'll sort of make them a little bit less sharp as well, so that they won't hurt your cables. Okay, and there we go. So we've got a nice headphone winder here, earbuds in there, wrap it around, headphone jack in there, and we can shove a keyring on. So that's it. Alright guys, that's going to wrap us up for tutorial 1. Really hope you learned something. It'll be cool to hear from you in the comment section below if there's anything in particular that you'd like us to include in tutorial number 2. Maybe hit the subscribe button and then you'll know when tutorial number 2 does come out, so you can follow through that as well. We'd love to see what you've made or modeled in this, so it'd be cool if you could take some photos and share it with us on whatever platform suits you. And hopefully we'll hear from you soon.